Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, about the only original chapter I'm comfortable calling a genuine thematic failure. The All-Kill chapter, starring Ji-Woon and Yun-Jin Lee. Now, before I go on, I want to make a couple of things clear. I'm not saying that All-Kill was a complete disaster, or that it's even my least favourite chapter, because neither of those things are true. While I really do dislike it, it doesn't even come close to the absolute molten disasters that were Darkness Among Us and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Regardless of my personal opinions on the Trickster or his chapter, All-Kill didn't bring us the literal poster child for a badly designed killer that had to get reworked into total irrelevance to be even remotely fair, as well as the poster child for a badly designed map that was so dire it put Haddonfield and RCPD to shame. And much like the Legion, Ormond demanded a rework that didn't even really solve its problems, but just made it less egregiously unfair to deal with. And nor did All-Kill bring us a licensed release so badly crunched out that not only did the map, Freddy's power, and Quentin's face all have to be reworked and mostly still suck, not only did it give us a smorgasbord of terrible perks, and Bloodwarden I guess, it also damaged the release of everyone's big thick Chainsaw Man so badly that he had to get reworked too. Yes, A Nightmare on Elm Street is the only chapter to date that was so bad it damaged the release of another simply by proximity. Next to those two, All-Kill is actually kinda fine. And don't get me wrong, it did get some things very right. The killer perks were all actually very good, especially when the mid-chapter buff came to No Way Out. And Yun-Jin's character was fantastically realised. A lot of people have wanted a more morally ambiguous survivor for a very long time, and she slid naturally into the role while bringing an appropriately grim take on the K-pop industry with her story. And one more thing I'd like to get out of the way is that aesthetically, All-Kill was an absolute slam dunk. It looks properly gorgeous, and pretty loyal to that glitzy neon K-pop look it was clearly going for. The K-pop aesthetic was what the chapter was entirely built upon, and it did well to deck out Ji-Woon, Yun-Jin, and even the main menu to really look the part. But a chapter being an aesthetic success is not the same as being a thematic success. Aesthetics do contribute to the theme, but there's a lot more to the theme than just aesthetics. The theme is the glue that holds everything together, from aesthetics to story to gameplay, down to even the marketing. And all these different elements did not come together well in All-Kill. Even if every individual element was good, and some were decidedly not good, each one was pointing in a different direction, resulting in a chapter that felt confused and a little anemic. So that's how we come in. We're going to follow each different direction that All-Kill's thematic components led us to fully understand why this chapter is, at least in my opinion, a failure in execution on a theme. Let's start by discussing the unique selling point, or USP, of All-Kill. When looking for a core theme in any piece of media, you probably want to start by looking at the USP, because that's fundamentally why the people who made it thought you'd purchase or play or watch or read it. I always like to use Doom as an example here. Even the most direct and unsubtle piece of media will have some sort of theme tying it together. In Doom's case, it's literally right there on the cover of the game. The only thing they fear is you. Doom is the ultimate power fantasy of extreme violence against forces of darkness that only you can repel. Sure, Doom has other themes too, such as corporate exploitation of resources, but Doom's narrative isn't why you play Doom. It's not the game's USP. Doom's biggest theme is the absolute inimitable strength and resolve of the Doomslayer, and everything about it, from the music to the combat to the story to the combat to the visual design of the levels and monsters to the combat, hammers home that you are evil's greatest nightmare. Without it, it wouldn't be Doom. And it's what made the 2016 Doom, and especially Doom Eternal, feel so satisfying to play. It's very clear that the core theme of All Kill is supposed to be the dark underbelly of K-pop, and the unsavoury characters that it can cultivate. And I covered this in my second video about All Kill, but Yun-Jin's story actually delivered on that theme super well. Yun-Jin is, in every way, the corrupt corporate executive allowed to flourish in her corruption within an industry rife with inhumanity. I said before that Yun-Jin is the first survivor whose story overshadows the killer she came with, and I stand by that. But it's kind of impossible to ignore the fact that in pretty much any chapter, the killer should always be the star of the show. The survivor is definitely valuable, but they're ultimately just a skin, a backstory, and some perks. The killer, on the other hand, has all of those things, plus a power, a ton of unique animations, music and sounds, 20 add-ons, and usually gets the lion's share of the marketing material for the chapter. So they will usually make a much bigger impression than the survivor when evaluating the chapter as a whole. And Ji-Woon Hack is a bitter disappointment compared to Yun-Jin, because he just doesn't deliver on the promise of a character from the dark underbelly of K-pop. And just because he puts the screams of his victims into his music doesn't mean he's from the dark underbelly of K-pop, because nothing about who he is or what he does comes as a direct result of the K-pop industry. By that logic, because Ted Bundy stored the severed heads of his victims in his apartment as trophies, that means he comes from the dark underbelly of the interior design industry. Ji-Woon Hack has about as much to do with K-pop as Ted Bundy did to do with Grand Designs. It's a relatively small part of his overall identity. None of the reasons he has to kill or do anything really have to do specifically with K-pop. Ji-Woon would have been the same character if he'd been an American rock star, or a Parisian sculptor, or a Chinese photographer. Someone who wants the spotlight and mutilates and kills people who he displays as works of art, as a method of seeking attention. The attempted theme of the chapter only relates tangentially to Ji-Woon's character, so it belittles both Ji-Woon's story and the chapter's theme of the darker side of K-pop. As I said before, it's two signs pointing different ways, that make the chapter's themes feel unfocused. And if people who made the chapter don't think the themes are important enough to make them consistent and focused, why should we care about them? This extends to Ji-Woon's power too. It's not exactly what you'd call K-poppy. A truly well-made killer has their gameplay integrated well with their story. Kazan Yamaoka's story, for example, is about a man driven to acts of brutality by his own rage, traditionalism, and sense of entitlement. And his power involves bloodshed, turning him into a brutal and violent monster that smashes everything in his path. Charlotte and Victor's story is about a family making their way in the world in which they are hated, and they must fight together as a pair to survive. And their power involves them working together to hunt survivors as a duo. Ji-Woon's story is about a man desperate for attention, and to see his name in lights as he expresses himself as an artist. So he throws knives. Oh, okay then. It's a similar problem to the one I have with The Blight, except much worse, because it showcases a conceptual problem with the way Trickster is designed. Behaviour fundamentally never knew what to do with the Trickster, either thematically or in terms of gameplay. The knives suggest a level of precision and extreme dedication to practice, but everything in his lore suggests that performance comes naturally to him, and his confidence means that he's kinda sloppy when he has to be meticulous or precise about anything. For example, he doesn't do a good job of covering up his murders from Yun-Jin because he's not meticulous at covering his tracks and regularly makes mistakes or leaves loose ends. He's exceptionally lucky that her moral fibre is weak enough to let him continue regardless. Don't get me wrong, I think there were ways to make his character work, and I've thought about one of two directions they could have taken to make Ji-Woon's character motivations a little more specific to K-pop, while also justifying and explaining his power to tie it into the theme. The first one involves making Ji-Woon a more sympathetic character, and exposing the darker side of the K-pop training academies, and the systems by which K-pop idols are created. the sheer cruelty of the idol academies that apparently Ji-Woon flourished in is barely touched on in the story, despite the potential there to embrace the darker side of K-pop by doubling down on the industry's crushing corporate stranglehold over the lives and health of its stars. Yun-Jin already represents the corporate top brass, willing to damage lives to make a quick profit. Why couldn't Ji-Woon have been one of the lives that she damaged out to get revenge? Maybe Yun-Jin and the other producers were convinced that embracing an edgier style and performing dangerous stunts on stage would rake in the cash, and so put Ji-Woon through punishing training regimens to teach him to perform hazardous knife tricks on stage while singing and dancing. Maybe he accidentally kills one of his co-performers on stage doing one of these knife tricks, and Mighty One drops him because now he's a publicity hazard, and that's what sparks his revenge spree. It certainly wouldn't be a new thing for K-pop producers to impinge on the safety of their performers. A good example here is the Chinese singer Luhan, a former member of the K-pop boy band EXO, who filed a lawsuit against EXO's label SM Entertainment to get himself released from their contract. This was after he'd reportedly injured himself several times performing or practicing with the band, while the label restricted him from other pursuits like acting to keep him chained to EXO. Ji-Woon could have been a darker version of that story, pushed to his breaking point beyond what was safe or comfortable, only to lash out at the corporate executives who saw him as a product instead of a person. The alternative idea I want to talk about here would require a much more comprehensive rewrite, but would change the tone of the chapter in a really interesting way, while maintaining most of Ji-Woon's leering, unstable menace. Turn Ji-Woon from a crazy idol obsessed with himself to a crazy fan obsessed with someone else. Notably, this isn't entirely my idea. Other people have discussed similar things before, but most of them revolve around turning Yun-Jin into the idol in question. But honestly, I think she suits the role of a corrupt corporate executive way too well to change it. Yun-Jin's sister, however, is already a character in her story. Why not make her the idol, and have Yun-Jin as her manager, partially driven by jealousy of her sister's success? Rewrite Ji-Woon's character completely, into some rich idiot with no day job, maybe the son of Mighty One's CEO or whatever, who grows rapidly obsessed with Yun-Jin's sister as she climbs the steps to stardom. He starts to dress like the dancers in her music videos, he learns acrobatics and knife tricks and sleight of hand to try to impress her with his talents, but gets frustrated when she resists his advances. He ignores boundaries, tracks her to her home, follows her everywhere, and uses his parents' position at the company to have as much access to her as he can. Maybe Yun-Jin sees this happening and refuses to protect her sister, because she's too busy blinded by jealousy and a desire to make it big as an idol herself, to look out for her sister until it's too late, and Ji-Woon kills her, out of a sense of entitlement and disgust that no matter how hard he works, he can't have her to himself. Given how obsessive fans in general, and especially K-pop stans can be, that would be a hell of a powerful story and truly embrace the darker side of K-pop and the dangers of the obsessive stan culture that many of these companies intentionally try to cultivate. But I think there's a very good reason that Behaviour didn't really try to criticise K-pop itself too heavily when making the Trickster story. Because exploring the darker side of K-pop would not be profitable. An entire chapter basically calling out die-hard K-pop stans or criticising the industry that creates them would be counterproductive, because the whole point of the chapter in the first place was to sell Dead by Daylight to K-pop stans. And this becomes abundantly clear when you compare it to something that came a couple of years prior, an event in gaming that was so successful that it actually started to break out of the bubble that gaming promotions are usually confined to, and began to break into the mainstream. KDA is a virtual K-pop band created by Riot Games, originally as part of the promotional material for the 2018 League of Legends World Championships. It consisted of 4 pre-existing champions who were brought together into the band: Kaisa, Evelyn, Akali, and Ari. they were each given new modern looks that were released as the extremely profitable KDA skins and took part in a music video for Pop Stars, an actual single Riot made in collaboration with real-life K-pop artists. Madison Beer, J-Ra Burns, and G-Idol members Soyeon and Miyeon provided the voices for the 4 band members, and performed live as their characters during the World's 2018 final in Incheon in South Korea. I can't overstate how much KDA mania there was at the time of Popstar's release, or how much it changed League of Legends. Worlds has had a virtual band with skin releases and at least one new song every year since then. The tide of KDA merch was unending, and every member of KDA received a prestige version of their skins that had players grinding for hundreds of hours to get them, and resulted in every major skin release since then getting at least one prestige skin. Because Riot had figured out how to get K-pop fans interested in their game, and keep them there spending their money after Popstars came out. Several factors contributed to their success. League of Legends' incredible popularity in Korea meant there was already some amount of brand overlap. The use of cosmetics for existing characters instead of making new characters made the process of a fantasy game dipping into K-pop less of a tone shift, and League of Legends has a general proclivity for the same conventionally attractive anime-esque women copy and pasted 60 times like a fucking gacha game, and that lends itself to the kind of body type and general aesthetic you'd expect from a K-pop girl group. But the big reason that Riot's musical collaboration worked so well was the music itself. As obvious as it sounds, the key to putting K-pop into a game is to actually put K-pop into it. Look, I'm not a K-pop enjoyer as a rule, but even I have to admit Popstars was a fucking banger. And everything about the promotion was centered around the song. The skins were the outfits the group used in the video, samples from the song were used in their effects, the live performance of the real-life artists at Worlds was for that song. The most important part of Riot's K-pop collaboration was, surprise surprise, the K-pop. And they knew this when they made it, because this wasn't the first musical collaboration Riot had done. In 2014, Pentakill was formed, a virtual metal band consisting of 5 champions: Mordekaiser on lead guitar, Yorick on the bass, Olaf drumming, Sona on the keyboard, and Karthus's vocals.
Within my grasp.
Come couch at 1v1.
My attention.
Come couch at 1v1.
And much like KDA, these parts were played by actual metal artists and industry professionals, with the skins even modelled in many cases after icons of rock and metal such as Slash, or even the artists themselves. Pentakill Karthus seems to have stolen the hair and general affect of his singer, the Norwegian Jon Lander, and Kale, the newcomer to the band, who joined for Pentakill's comeback in 2017, bears more than a passing resemblance to her singer Nora Lahimo. By the way, if you're interested in that kind of music, check out Nora's band Battle Beast. They are absolutely stunning and Nora's voice really is one of a kind. Pentakill didn't just get a single like KDA, but instead received a full album, Smite and Ignite, in 2014, with the second, Grasp of the Undying, coming in 2017. The second release introduced Kale as a 6th member of the band, with her own skin, as well as a full animated music video for the song Mortal Reminder. It's worth noting, this was a full year before KDA took to the stage in 2018, so they weren't just copying the established formula. Mortal Reminder was the experiment, with a fully animated music video to make sure that Popstars landed well. And the formula has been tried again since. Worlds 2019 brought us True Damage, a hip-hop group with their single Giants being performed at the Worlds Finals in Paris. Soyeon from G-Idol reprised her incredibly popular role as Akali, and frankly stole the show with her rapping in True Damage far better than she ever did in KDA. And Riot brought on some names that might be more familiar to Western listeners: Kiki Palmer, Duckworth, Thutmose, and Becky G. Yasuo, Echo, Akali, Kiana, and the new champion Senna got the skins and the music video this time round. And if you ask me, True Damage was the best musical collaboration that Riot has ever done. Don't get me wrong, I love Pentakill with all my heart because I'm a metalhead, of course I love it. But the sheer amount of polish and style that True Damage just oozes in every single aspect makes it second to none for me. The animation style is more playful and energetic than the photorealism that KDA went for. And where Pentakill can feel cheesy and intentionally over the top sometimes, True Damage's designs felt genuinely cool and loyal to the characters, to the point that True Damage Kiana, portrayed by the inimitable Becky G, actually suits the personality of the character better than her original model. Next to the legacy of what they blatantly tried to copy, All Kill feels lackluster. Like Behaviour just went through the motions of trying to piggyback off the success of KDA and True Damage, without actually putting the work in or understanding why they were successful. By putting so little emphasis on the actual music, and relying on a fanservice-y flat character and glitzy aesthetics to sell their chapter, Behaviour managed to completely miss the mark when trying to replicate the mania that made KDA a guaranteed moneymaker for Riot. Yes, Ji-Woon's story was poor, and yes, his power was not well thought out, but I'm pretty sure huge chunks of the community, myself included, would likely have forgiven that, or at least tried to look past it, if the chapter really decided to go all in on its USP and deliver something that stood out from the crowd by actually embracing the genre of music the chapter was trying to market to. Remember this little animatic from the startup screen for the game? Yeah, I don't know anybody who disliked this. It was a fresh take on promotion for a killer, much like the Clowns cartoon he just got in his new tome, and it put the loud and bright look of the trickster into his context. It sold him as a killer who flourished in his environment, which is important when he's such a visual contrast from every other killer. Imagine if that animatic was the centrepiece of the chapter's promotion from the start. We had all the Twitter teasers that led up to the chapter with the Mighty One banner and the silhouetted face of Yun-Jin and all that jazz, and then he just sort of plopped onto the PTB without really much of a fanfare. Imagine, instead, if all that social media hinting culminated in the release of this, extended into a full animated music video to let Ji-Woon really strut his stuff and show the world that this is our new killer. He's really different from everything else. He's totally new. We're going for something really bizarre and off the wall, and here he is in all his glory. He could be doing his knife tricks on stage and killing people and doing all the cool shit we'd expect someone like Ji-Woon to be doing. And for that to have been our first impressions of the new guy, I think it could have been a roaring success. Or at least could have been the start of something memorable. Word of mouth and social media would have completely changed from look at K-pop Joker over there, he spilled strawberry jam all over himself, do you need a bib, you little tiny baby man, to wow, actually this music is a fucking banger and it's for this game, Dead by Daylight, nice, I'll go check it out. Apparently Behaviour did get producers from BTS in to help with the chapter, but frankly I don't see what they actually did. As I said before, this chapter is just K-poppy enough to alienate itself from the rest of DBD, but not so K-poppy that it comes off as a bold new direction for the game that actually stands out as something memorable, because Yun-Jin's lore aside, the new stuff that it brought was so paper thin. Ironically, the release of All Kill was very similar not to the original breakout success of KDA, but to the comeback of KDA last year that was widely considered a bit of a shambles, because it came with the bemoaned release of Seraphine. Seraphine wasn't a character, she was a marketing concept to sell expensive skins to K-pop stans who would buy anything if it had a KDA logo tapped onto it. The attention was shifted away from the music and towards the aesthetic, and it relied a lot more on the ARG-like premise that Seraphine was a real musician trying to make her way in the world. Seraphine had her own social media account and her own legion of stans long before she took to the stage. And when her $25 ultimate skin came out with her release, it was not very popular, because it was transparently clear that Seraphine was an attempt to invoke the K-pop aesthetic without putting the work in, and her implementation damaged the cohesion of League of Legends as an IP. Ji-Woon Hack is exactly the same. He's limp-wristed, he's half-baked, he's a product of behaviour not knowing how hard to play into the K-pop angle. They couldn't decide whether to really play out their full hand in an attempt to rake in the money from the K-pop crowd they were clearly trying to appeal to, or whether to satisfy the existing players of the game by giving them something tonally consistent with what DBD already was. So they tried to do both and ultimately achieved neither. And I don't think they planned on doing that at all. The evidence that we have suggests that behaviour genuinely expected All Kill to be a huge financial success, that it just wasn't. That's actually why I chose to make this video right here, right now, because Ji-Woon Hack and Yun-Jin Lee have been leaked to be the subject of Tome IX, presumably coming in the mid-chapter in late October. This very much caught my eye, because there are a lot of older survivors and killers who I would say deserve that slot more. I truly expected that we'd get Fang Min as the survivor, and either Kazan Yamaoka or Danny Johnson as the Tome IX killers, because those are the oldest respective characters on either side who don't have a tome yet. Put it this way, if it was done in chronological order like these things often loosely are, we'd have Oni, Ghostface, Deathslinger and Twins to do before Trickster, and Fang Min, Zarina, Felix and Elodie to do before Yun-Jin. Trickster and Yun-Jin have had way more cosmetics than most killers do immediately after their release. Hell, Trickster currently has more skins than the Twins do, despite him coming out 3 months after them, a fact that rankles with me to this day. Yun-Jin's blue outfit set was highly publicised before their release. The ARG style marketing was obviously an attempt to build hype for the chapter, and the unique animation style of the starting screen indicates that they were planning something special here. It just really didn't come together. The tome being forced out very soon after their release is consistent with that. They're trying to cram DBD with as much all-kill content as possible in an attempt to attract the K-pop fans the chapter was meant to sell the game to. Or maybe they just watched my Trickster lore video and rushed the tome out because I said that the Trickster story feels incomplete, and he probably needed a tome to flesh him out. It was me, I did it, it's my fault, I'm simply too insightful and caused this to happen. Sometimes genius like this is a curse, it really is. Regardless, behaviour is trying ever so hard to salvage what they can from the burning wreckage of the All Kill chapter. And I can't say I entirely blame them. Between the smoothness and popular gameplay of Descend Beyond, the incredibly innovative and complex killer power and fantastic storytelling of A Binding of Kin, and the awesome scale, new player friendliness and raw star power of Resident Evil, All Kill is kind of a lackluster offering in terms of recent chapters. And it had potential to spark an influx of new players into Dead by Daylight from a whole new demographic. But thanks to some identity and thematic dysfunctions, it kinda backfired and made a memorably forgettable chapter that was overshadowed completely by its successor. I hope that Ji-Woon and Yun-Jin get the tome that they need to put their themes back on track, and behaviour continues to experiment with what their tomes and animations can give us. I'd be surprised if we didn't get another anime-style animatic like we got for the startup screen in the tome. And perhaps they'll even give us some new music to go along with the inevitable rough cosmetics that the duo will get. But at this point, I think too much damage has already been done by behaviour botching the initial chapter concept for it to really be able to turn things around. I want to be proven wrong about this, I really, really do. But I'm not exactly optimistic that the comeback of Ji-Woon Hack will be anything other than forgettable. Okay, so that concludes everything I have to say about the thematic disaster that was All Kill. If you're excited for Trix's Tome 9 to be coming in the next mid-chapter update, then please do subscribe. A review of it will be coming out when we get it. And even if you're not terribly excited for it, I'd still appreciate the subscribe, simply because I had paid elections for this video, and I need something good to show for giving myself actual brain trauma by daring to play that fucking game. Nevertheless, in the description you can find links to my Twitter, my Twitch, my Discord server, and my Patreon and Ko-fi links if you feel like this content is worth your money. I mostly wanted to just get this out of the way now because it's a very exciting time coming up. Between this channel's first anniversary on YouTube coming up at the end of the month, and the PTB for Chapter 21 coming on the 17th, I have such sights to show you.